We're going to start right here with this one here. Choose the one alternative that best completes the statement or answers the question. Everybody's already read that, right? Technician A says positive crankcase ventilation systems use a valve or a fixed orifice to control the fumes from the crankcase back into the intake system. To control the fumes from the crankcase back in. Technician B says the PCV valve regulates the flow of fumes depending on engine vacuum and seals the crankcase vent in the event of a misfire. Who is right about that? All right, now do all of them do that? Actually, so how does the PCV valve work? Anybody know? Could you draw me a picture?
It's got a, yeah, probably.
Okay, so what you got up here? What you got right here is you got vacuum coming in here, right? All right. Now what's the rest of it?
Oh,
let's
it open.
Of course it is. Let's see how well he knows this.
Okay. This is the PCV valve?
That's a PCV valve.
Okay. That's your crankcase.
Crankcase.
Poly valve cover. Anyway, this goes down here. Alright, you got a line.
Big one, yeah.
Big one. Then you got out of the top of it, I can't really draw the top of it, we're going to say it comes out of here.
Yeah.
It comes out of here. And here's your,
What is this?
this is the line coming out. It coming out from this, through this, that's the vacuum line. I couldn't draw the top because there's not enough space. But I drew it outside. Anyway, so.
Is everybody else as confused as I am by this drawing?
Yes, I actually get what he's saying, but I got a question on some vehicles you take the oil cap off and the car will go dead and then some they won't. If they got the same.
When you take your oil cap off, your PCV system is pulling air in there,
Right.
and all that. And if it's got the way the PCV system is designed, some of them is different. And if enough air goes in that oil filler cap, it's going to cause it. It's like an unmetered air leak. It's like unhooking the air hose from your throttle body.
I know they'll go dead on the probes, but
Yeah.
then some of the
So this is the crankcase.
Yeah.
Valve cover. This is vacuum coming into the PCV valve. This is the vacuum, the line coming out of this, through this, up and around to the intake. That's an intake. It's just small. It's off in the distance.
Well, what is this?
This is the regulator.
Huh?
It's a regulator.
Okay, you're scaring me to death. Let's get rid of this.
Okay.
That's all right. It's okay. Good try, JT. Crash your burn.
Crash and burn is awful.
Crash your burn. Crash your burn.
That's what it looks like.
Okay, now listen. Let's do it this way. Let's put an engine here. Okay, we're gonna make it a V, right? Or let's don't make it a V this time around. Let's just go ahead and make it a 4-cylinder engine as seen from the side with the pistons in here like this, right? Okay. Typically, you're gonna see the PCV system like this going into the intake, right? You know, it's going to be a vacuum coming in there. And the big old air hose is actually, now this is actually let's put the intake up here. And we got a vacuum line going up into the intake. Well, your throttle body and all that's right here. And it's going to have this going to the breather. Big breather box right over here. And most of the time nowadays, you're going to have on the other side of this, you're going to have a hose that's going there. All right, so the PCV valve is basically going to pull vapors that are blow-by vapors that are getting past the rings, and they're have a tendency to pressure up the crankcase and blow the seals if it can't breathe, and it's going to create a flow of clean air through here, so it's constantly moving that blow-by air into the intake and processing it. Now, what we were getting at earlier, what I was wanting to draw earlier, is the PCV valve itself has got on the inside a tapered orifice, right, with a spring.
You didn't have to draw the inside of the valve.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, that's okay. You didn't do so terribly, man. I think you understood what you were trying to do. I don't know why I keep doing that. Okay, and this thing right here with the vacuum coming in, right? Vacuum coming into that thing, the hose goes on here and all that. So if you got vacuum right here, basically, what are you going to have? You got vacuum here. This is going to be pulled back all the way, isn't it? And you're going to have a maximum amount of flow that's coming from the other side. Now, if it backfires, the vacuum goes away, but it shoves this back, and it keeps backfire from going to the crankcase. Now, on some of them, the Jap cars and on that Jeep out there, instead of having a PCV valve, they've got a grommet with a little bitty hole right in the middle of it, down in your valve cover, and there's a plastic vacuum line, which is only like a quarter of an inch, is going over here to engine vacuum. And then on the other side, you got a grommet with a hose that lets air go in there. But they just use a little tiny orifice. You got to watch those because they'll stop up. Now, if you pull your closure hose, which is the one that's going to the, to the one that's coming from the air cleaner, if you pull that hose off and you put your finger over the engine idling, you ought not to feel anything, but you ought to feel a little bit of vacuum there or dead air. If you feel pressure, then this is probably clogged up or something like that. Now, sometimes when that PCV system, when you pull that big, if you got the regular PCV valve, like you see on so many cars, if you pull that off, and I don't have a PCV valve in my hand to show everybody, if you pull that line off, you'll hear a sound of like a hurricane. I mean, just a lot of air. If you pull it off and it's barely got any vacuum there at all, you better be following that hose back to the intake and see if it's clogged up with carbon, because a lot of times it will be. That's the point on that. That's the PCV thing that I was looking at. Okay, so that should have been A, because the Aura, this kind right here, does not have any kind of a flutter valve in it to prevent backfires. It's just got such a tiny little orifice that even if it does backfire, it won't matter, because there's barely any pressure there at all. Got it? The positive crankcase ventilation system controls which of these exhaust gases, HC, CO, NOx, or HCnCO? What does it control?
D.
Both of them, HC and CO. Technician A says as much as 50% of the air needed by the engine at idle speed flows through the PCV system. Wow, that's a heck of a lot, isn't it? Technician B says exhaust check valves are used between the AIR pump, which is air injection reactor, and the exhaust manifold to prevent exhaust gases from flowing into and causing damage to the air pump and valves. Who's right about that? Huh?
Rule number 3.
I'm sorry, did I jump over 3?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Well, let's do 4 and we'll back up to 3.
You said number 1 was A.
Huh?
Number 1 was A.
What?
You said number 1 was A.
Yeah, number 1 was an A because the PCV valve, if it's a fixed orifice, it's not going to do that.
Okay.
But now that the PCV valve actually does keep the backfire from going back in there, PCV valve regulates the flow of fumes depending on engine vacuum and seals a crankcase. Well, technically, if it's a valve, both of them's right, but on these right here, you don't have a valve. That's what I was thinking about. And the answer key claims it's A. But I can see how you would have a problem with that, and if I was taking this test, I would probably answer it as both of the guys being right. Matter of fact, I probably ought to change that, because I don't like what I'm seeing there. That's all Amanda put her head in her hands. Okay. 3. Technician A says 50% of the air flows through the PCV. Technician B says PCV tests include rattle tests, card tests, snapback tests, crankcase vacuum tests. Who's right about that? That's 3.
That's 30%, right?
Yeah, it's not 50%, it's 30%, so A's wrong. Rattle test is when you shake the PCV valve. Whenever you put a piece of card on it or something, it needs to hold it. Now that's just really sort of, I don't think all that great, because I have seen, and I'll tell you something else too, you have to put the right PCV valve on there for that vehicle. And I have seen people just grab a PCV valve because they think they're all alike and pop them on there, and it causes the gas airflow to be wrong, and it causes fuel trim readings to go crazy and all that kind of stuff, only because they put the wrong PCV valve on there. The little orifice in the bottom of the PCV valve, that's usually about as big as that hole right there in that thing. It can be different sizes, and if you put one in there that's flowing too much air, it'll actually cause it to throw codes and have your fuel trim screwed up. So make doggone sure that you got the right PCV valve in there anytime you got a situation like that, because the least little bit of too much air going in there that the system is not built for will cause that PCM to tilt everything a little out of line. Just make sure you understand that. So actually, what I did earlier that Amanda was calling me down for appropriately was I read the first part of question 3 and the second part of question 4, which is really confusing. Okay, technician A says the secondary air injection system forces air at low pressure to the exhaust to reduce carbon monoxide and HC emissions. Is he right? Is he right or is he wrong? Does the secondary air injection system force air at low pressure into the exhaust to reduce CO and HC? Why is it even there? Why is the CO, why is it there? Whenever you crank an engine up cold, is it running richer or leaner than it does when it's warm?
Richer, because the gasoline is not dispersing as much because it's sticking to the wall.
Yeah, you're basically, that's part of the deal, and then they got the, little early fuel evaporation set up for that, but, so you are gonna be reducing that. Upstream air is gonna go into the manifold, and it's gonna burn up, it's gonna add extra oxygen, finish letting it unite with the, partially burned gas that's coming out when the engine's cold, and that cleans that up. But it also dumps it downstream on the ones that are set up that way to the catalytic converter, so the rear brick can deal with hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide by adding extra air to that too. The front catalyst deals with NOx, and that's the light off cat, and it's got to have an absence of oxygen in order to do what it wants to do. So, and everything works really good because when are you producing the most NOx? When the engine's hot, right?
Yep.
Got it? So whenever the engine, until the engine warms up, your light off cat's not really doing a whole lot anyway. So the oxygen you're putting upstream that to take care of the hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide is not hurting anything as far as in the let off cap, but then it goes downstream, and when you let off, it dumps into the atmosphere. I don't know what things were set up. Now, let me tell you this, just briefly. Some of your air injection reaction systems do not have any kind of a pump. So how do you get air into the exhaust if you got no pump?
You use the exhaust stream. They have it at an angle. Like the exhaust flow this way, if you have something sticking.
That's not a bad idea.
Instead of flat.
That's not a bad idea. But what they really do, everybody knows that the exhaust system has got low pressure.
Vacuum.
No, I mean the exhaust system is actually doing this. If you measure the pressure in the exhaust system, it's got a fluttering sort of a pop, 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 pop. And so they use that. They got a little flutter valve built into this thing, little reed valve, and it uses these natural puffing pulsations, low pressure puffs in the exhaust to pull air in.
It won't work if you put a header in it.
Yeah, well, I understand that. That's why
Instead of being puffs,
Yep.
a header, they measure them so that number one fire and number two, like number three fire, and it'll pull it.
they call it an extractor exhaust to pull the exhaust out. That's right, but it's still creating low pressure. You got low pressure that it will pull it. So you're not using back pressure to do it, you're using low pressure to do it. So it would still actually work that way. However, what there's more and more common nowadays is electric air pumps. Now, we talk about that a little bit later, I imagine probably in this test. But anyway, I just wanted to cover that with you. Look at this. Technician B says exhaust check valves are used between the air pump and the exhaust manifold to prevent exhaust gases from flowing into and causing damage to the air pump. Both of them right? On 4? Does anybody know? Or is everybody just waiting for me to give you the answer? Is technician A right? Does it force air at low pressure in the exhaust to reduce CO?
Yes.
It does. 8 psi if you're putting it on a lawnmower, right? Okay, technician B says check valves are used between the air pump. Now, you don't want the exhaust, but what are those valves made of? These valves that operate the AR system are plastic. The hoses are rubber. You got them hooked into the exhaust. How the Sam Hill are you going to keep that hot exhaust from going up there and burning up those plastic valves? You got a little check valve so that air can only go one way. But when those burn out, when those things burn out, and eventually they do, because years ago they used to make them out of something that wasn't quite so durable, and they'd rot out and burn out on the inside, and then all the exhaust would be coming screaming up through there, and it would melt these, mess the hoses up, make them all hard and everything, and then it would mess up these little air diverter valves and whatnot. So you'd have to replace all that
Is
stuff.
that why you'll smell plastic on the car?
Sometimes. All right.
So see,
Yep. And when I was at General Motors School in 1980, she was saying when you rev it up and you let it off, you're supposed to hear the air bypass go. You might have heard that. You rev the car up, let it off, you'll hear someone bypass. It's got air bypass. And they try to make that not quite so noisy. All right. And it used to bypass into the breather for what it's worth. Okay, so number 4, both of those guys are right. What percentage of the air needed by the engine flows through PCV? What'd you say? 30%. That was what Lawrence said. Now, let me ask you this. It's pulling it out of the crankcase, and that's what Lee was asking a while ago. You take the oil filler cap off, your fuel trims go crazy because you're pulling air in there that's not metered. The metered air is actually going to your... Now, if you got mass airflow, it's going to do that, but if you got MAP, you're not typically going to have as much of a problem with that as you are with with the mass airflow. Secondary air injection reactor used to reduce what exhaust emission gas? That's number 6. D, both of them, HC and CO. We talked about that. There's another question about PCV system. It's got the same answer, right? Where's the output of the air injection reactor pump directed when the engine is cold? When it's cold. Exhaust manifold. And what did I just tell you about that? Why is it directed to the exhaust manifold?
When it's hot.
When it's cold, it's running richer. Remember, think about a carburetor with the choke closed. Anybody that's there's lots and lots of people in here that have been so used to no-touch starting, where you just don't have to do anything with the gas except start it up, that you'd probably totally be alienated by a carburetor, right? On a carburetor, you got to tap, hit the gas to set the choke, boom, crank it up, and then tap the gas again, it comes down, that kind of stuff. But anyway, whenever it's cold, I always think about that. When it's cold, the choke is closed, you got a rigid running engine. Even in those days, people used to grumble about that on your old Camaros and stuff because they'd have a separate pipe going to each exhaust runner, and the air pump would pump air into those pipe going to each exhaust runner to burn up that extra gas that was coming out of those rich running cylinders, and keep them from being. And if you've got one that, when you had a vehicle that had been discombobulated on, people would pull that off, and they'd put plugs in there, and they'd get the air pump off, and they'd throw it in the trash and all that kind of stuff in these states where we didn't get in trouble for that. And you can always smell that thing when you start it up cold. It stinks like gas, like unburned gas, The newer cars now, you don't even smell hardly anything when they crank up, except a little bit of water vapor coming out of them. And how many of you, I've told you this before, and this is something else you need to talk about for PCV. You make a gallon of water for every gallon of gas you burn. Got to get rid of that. PCV system's not working. You wind up with water condensing in the crankcase. When water condenses in the crankcase, it mixes with some of the stuff in the oil, and it turns into gummy crud. It gets this thick on the inside of the engine. And I will tell you this, if you go somewhere, like if you take an engine, for instance, a vehicle, nice late model vehicle, to a dealership, or just about any shop, and it is sludged up only really bad, so the point of where trying to stop up the oil screen down there, and is not, and because it's starved for oil, they will, even if it hadn't starved for oil and damaged the engine, they will replace the engine rather than work on cleaning all that sludge out. Toyota was doing that. Toyota misdesigned some of their PCV systems, and it was gumming up their engines, and they would put another engine there. Because it costs more to clean all that crud out of there and get that engine back in shape than it would to put another one.
What about with seat on under 15 minutes and drain all out to new oil?
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that you can try to do to straighten that out, but it never gets every bit of it out. Tell you something else, too. I run into this before. I pull the intake off to have bad lifters or whatever. I have to pull the intake off for some reason or another. And all of this crud that's underneath the intake, if you ain't really careful, if you disturb that, or even if you try to scrape it and clean it out of there, it's going to migrate into the oil pan. You get all your work done, everything, you got your gaskets on there cleaned up, you got everything tightened up, everything torqued and all that. You drive the car, all of a sudden whenever you're idling, you notice the oil light coming on. Because that crud has gone into the oil pan, and now it's trying to clog up the screen. And I've had to, after I got through with all this other work on the top end, stupid oil lights coming on, I got to pull the thing back up on the lift, jerk the stupid oil pan off, whatever you got to do, get the sludge out of the oil pan. Well, this guy over here had a Ford Ranger that he said, my oil light's coming on. I said, well, you probably got a clogged up screen, because I noticed he had a fairly sludged up crankcase. You know what that knothead did? It was funny. I mean, to him, this is a redneck guy that thinks kind of like I do. He jacks this thing up out here in the yard. He pulls the oil drain plug out, sees some oil in a filter. He shines a light up in there, and he can see the screen. So he scrapes with a screwdriver and gets that crud off the screen and washes it off with some, anything, what it was, a PB blaster or something he washed it off with so it wouldn't break down the oil. He cleaned it all out and, washed it really good, and he filled it back up with oil and took care of his oil pressure problem around in the parking lot through the oil drain plug hole. Because he can see it. I mean, you can't do that on every vehicle, but he made it happen on his because, for the price of an oil change and a can of stuff, he fixed what ordinarily he had to have the pan pulled off. There's more than one way to skin a cat, although I've never skinned a cat in my life, so I can't really talk with authority about that. All right. Now then, it goes to the exhaust manifold when it's cold. When checking for the proper operation of AIR system using the exhaust gas analyzer, what percentage of O2 increases when the pump is allowed to function? In other words, if you're going to turn on the air injection reactor and you're using your exhaust gas analyzer, and you'll see oxygen level increase at the tailpipe when the pump is allowed to function. All right, so what are you going to see there? Anybody see that? You got 1 to 4%. 1 to 4%, according to what we've got in our book answer key. And you might even notice your test has got a beautiful picture of the PCV valve there and how it operates. Down there on page 2 of the test. What is the purpose of the secondary air injection system? What is the purpose of the secondary air injection system? All right, 9. Pump air into the exhaust manifold. That's mostly what it does right now. mostly what it does right now. You almost never see a pipe going to the converter anymore. And like I say, a lot of them have electric air pumps. Volkswagens, Passats and stuff have a potential for the electric air pump to fail because their water settles down in the lowest part of the system. Condensation in that system gets in there and wipes out the electric air
I
pump.
drove one of those that I was talking to, and you could floorboard it, get out, fix a sandwich, eat it, and come back, and you might be moving by the time you come back.
Yeah, well, that's not the natural way that a Passat runs. You just had a bad one. The hose connected to the check valve to the air diverter valve is severely burned in a secondary air injection system. The cause of the problem could be which of these: defective air diverter valve, defective check valve, excessive HC emissions, or overheated catalysts. Defective check valve. Remember what I told you about that? Check valves go bad, hoses get burned, valves get melted. This process of gases leaking past the rings is called what? In other words, whenever gas leaks past the piston ring, blow by. Yes, ma'am, that's right. That's B. B is blow by. B should be blow by because blow by starts with B and B. So we got B and B there. Although I don't like it. Yeah, blow by. Blow by starts with B, and so the answer is B to that, right? I'm just trying to confuse you. The flow rate is for PCV. The flow rate for a PCV valve is determined by the size of the plunger and the blank inside the valve.
Holes.
Does that sound good to y'all? Everybody like that answer? You like that? Okay, what kind of engine operation is indicated by the PCV valve shown in the illustration below? What's going on with this PCV valve? That particular PCV valve, what's happening?
I say C.
Yeah,
It's not
C
true all the
too.
way out. It's not true all the way out. I say idle.
Yeah,
Okay. Anybody else?
I like B.
All right, think about it now. All right, that's number 13.
It's gonna be C or D.
I say I don't know now.
I think it's
Still
C.
say C.
Well, it's got the spring squeezed.
It's not true.
There's an awful lot of flow through there, right? Okay, so you got good strong vacuum. I'd say if you got good strong vacuum. Of course, now let me ask you this: you've also got pressure. If there's a lot of blow by, there's pressure too that's kind of helping hold that valve open too, isn't it? So it can be high speed and it can be heavy load. So I would say that's going to be a D. What do you think?
Good job, Lee.
Yeah, and after we start talking, now these questions are from the next chapter, and we're basically talking about catalytic converters. Can somebody tell me what a catalyst is? What is a catalyst? Define catalyst.
A catalyst is like a screen, something that holds things.
Anybody else give me a better?
Something else.
Yeah.
No, it changes some, like one chemical into a different one, but it's not involved in the reaction itself.
Very, very good. Very, very good. She gave you a good answer. That is a good answer. And
Scientists,
You know,
Put it in dumb redneck talk.
well, leave it to her. Dad's a doctor. I mean, you've heard this before. A catalyst is something that causes a chemical change in other compounds without undergoing a chemical change itself. It causes a change without being changed. That makes sense? A catalyst causes a change without being changed. Everybody understand that? Have you ever heard of a person being a catalyst for change? You see what I'm saying? See, I'm supposed to be a catalyst for change. I'm supposed to bring people in here that don't know anything, and they're supposed to learn from what I tell them so that they're changed, but I'm supposed to not be changed, although sometimes I am changed by some people. But
learn a little bit.
yeah, exactly. Everybody's learning from everybody else. But the point is, the catalyst for change is somebody or something that causes a change in other elements without it changing itself. That catalytic converter is not supposed to change, but it's supposed to make a lot of difference in what's going out the back. So it gets hot, it gets cold, it gets hot, it gets cold. It's supposed to last the life of the car, and so on and so forth. So, to which of these substances is applied to the ceramic substrate to make the surface porous?
Zinc coating.
You got a wash coat, cerium, zinc coating, or aluminum, or if you're British, you'd say aluminium. All right.
Really?
Yep, that's what they say. It's not that doesn't, aluminium is what they say. All right, what do you got on 14?
Cerium.
Are you sure it's cerium? Is that what your book says?
That's what I said.
Which of the substances is applied to the ceramic substrate to make the surface porous? What do you see? Somebody locate me an answer in the book about that. You got wash coat, you got cerium, you got zinc coating, you got aluminum.
I'm getting after it. Hold on.
applied to the ceramic substrate.
Oh, sorry. Wash coat.
Wash coat, very good. Wash coat is the answer. A catalytic converter has to be at or near which of these temperatures before it starts to work? It's got to be at A, 500 degrees Fahrenheit, B, 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, C, 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, or D, 1000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Hey, 500 degrees Fahrenheit.
500 degrees Fahrenheit. Did you know that on the newer cars, like on my Ford pickup truck, if we plug a scan tool in my Ford pickup truck, it'll tell me what the catalyst temperature is. I mean, so that's really important that we know what the catalyst temperature is, because if it's running too cool, it's not going to work, right?
All fingerprints upstairs.
What two primary sensors does a PCM use to check the catalytic converter? What two primary sensors does a PCM use to check the catalytic converter? A, catalytic converter temperature sensor and rear oxygen sensor. B, pre-cat O2S and MAF sensor, mass airflow. C, pre-cat and post-cat oxygen sensor, or D, MAP and TP.
A.
See.
You get buzzed. Now, tell me the right answer, not just a guess. I've talked about this before.
I thought that theory.
Pre-cat.
It ain't pre-cat because it's before the catalytic converter. It can't be pre-cat because that's before the cat.
What you think? Pre-cat and post-cat.
Touche.
This is your cat. Now this is the light-off cat. Now get this in your mind, y'all. The light-off cat is the only one of these sensors are checking. It ain't checking the one in the back. It's only checking this one. All right. You got a sensor right there. You got a sensor right there. This sensor right here is supposed to be doing this. This sensor right here is supposed to be doing that. If these sensors right here is lazy, so this is coming from the engine, it's going this way, and your brick's in here. If this sensor right here is nice and snappy, and that one right there is nice and lazy, you got a catalyst that's storing oxygen just fine, so you're checking it with a pre-cat and the post-cat. You're comparing them to each other. It's the only way you can do that. Now, you got this situation sometimes where these are switching at the same rate. That will throw you a P0420. The catalytic converter can get contaminated and cause it not to store oxygen well, and you got to make sure that you're not just throwing a catalyst at it just because. But usually it's a bad cat.
How's it get contaminated like valve until then?
Yeah, just any hogwash that's coming out of the cylinders, like if you get enough or lead.
How you get lead in there? Like like you put lead.
Lead-based fuel, yeah, and all
Great
that.
gas or mess with the cat.
Yeah, or something like that. But you don't see leaded gas anymore.
Well, crap, go to the racetrack. That's all they use, leaded gas.
Well, yeah, I guess so. You could probably put some leaded gas from the gas tank in there. From the racetrack in there.
113.
Is that good?
No, burn up pistons. You don't want to.
Well, I don't know what I'm doing, so I better stay away from it. Okay. All right. There you go. So we got to know that. We got pre-cat and post-cat O2 sensors. We're trying to hurry because we want to get through with this.
Yes,
We're all tired of the classroom, right? We want to get out of the shop. And we're trying to talk loud. A catalytic converter is being tested with an infrared pyrometer. What's that? An infrared pyrometer. Which of these is an acceptable result? Inlet should be hotter than the outlet by 10%.
True.
Both the inlet and the outlet should be at the same temperature after the converter reaches operating temperature. What do you think? Outlet should be hotter than the outlet? What?
No.
No.
That doesn't make any sense. That should say outlet should be hotter than the inlet by 10%. That's a boo-boo on that test. Let's send an email. Take catalytic converter temperature is the best test to perform locate restricted or clog unit.
A.
Okay, let me tell you something about this catalytic converter temperature test. If I take my pyrometer and the engine's up here and it's going back that way and I shoot it here and it's at 250 degrees and I shoot it here and it's at 650 degrees, then I know that I've got a good nice flow going through here and it's doing like it's supposed to and it's getting good and hot and all that. If I shoot it here and it's reading 450 degrees and I shoot it here and it's reading 200 degrees, I know that I got a clogged up cat. But let me give you a caveat on that. Just because this is cooler than that does not mean the catalyst is not restricted. You understand what I'm saying? If I shoot that, let's say that I'm troubleshooting a low power concern, and I know my mass airflow is not the problem, I know fuel pressure is not the problem, I know the engine is actually healthy, but I'm troubleshooting a low power problem, if I shoot this and I see that this is 250 degrees and this is 450 or 500, that does not mean the catalyst is good. You understand that? We've seen that in the shop out here. Red Monte Carlo, 2000 model. Wouldn't go over 45 miles an hour. It's just awful. Shoot the catalyst, poof, poof. Everything was great as far as temperature. When we did a test of the back pressure, it pegged the gauge. Even though we had good hot temperatures here, good tool temperature here. If you're ever troubleshooting one and somebody says, well, I know the catalyst is good because it's cool here and it's hot there. Wrong. You cannot categorically say that. And all of the stuff I see in textbooks will say, if it's cool here, if it's cooler here than it is there, the catalyst is okay. The only thing you're going to do when you do that infrared test, if it's hotter here than it is there, you know it's bad. But if it's cooler here than it is there, you can't say that it's good. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Think about it. That's not a go, no-go test. Everything we do when we're troubleshooting, I like a go, no-go test. And the only time that turns into a go, no-go test is if it's hotter here than it is there. And the other way it's not. Like, for instance, on some of our charging system testing machines, if I see the light come on that tells me the diodes are bad, that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. You got to hook an oscilloscope up and look at that pattern to be sure if they're bad or not. Unless you're using an old VAT 40 Sun, and it never was fooled by anything. There aren't hardly any of them around anymore. Those suckers, that thing was cool. It would always tell you the truth about that. All right. Now, I'm wanting to go, no-go test is what I'm saying is. So what you're doing is, what you need to do when you're troubleshooting is you need to determine, is the results I'm getting from this test something I can rely on 100% of the time? Or is just another piece of data that I'm going to put together with some other data to find out if, point me in the right direction? All right, now then. So what should the answer be to number 17? Should be C. That's a stupidly worded, wrong, mistyped thing. Outlet should be hotter than the outlet by 10%. That makes no sense whatsoever. The outlet should be hotter than the inlet by 10%, so the way that ought to be worded, and that should be a C. Everybody that's here will get the benefit of that, of me correcting the question as I go. Which exhaust gas reading indicates a good catalytic converter? Number 18. Okay, O2. That's another screwed up question. Look at this. Let's look at the answers that got put here. Which exhaust gas reading indicates a good catalytic converter? O2, CO is 0, both technicians, neither A nor B. What's wrong with these answers? That is a totally stupid thing. All right.
Looks like they just got in a big hurry.
I'm gonna go with D.
Kind of forgot the question there.
Yep. That is, I don't even understand what we're supposed to do with that one. Okay, everybody, that one there, I'm just going to throw you what the answer key says so my girl won't get fouled. I got to make a notation of that and fix that question. That's ridiculous. 18 is supposed to be B. But that's not really a good answer as far as CO being 0. And we're going to hook up the exhaust gas. I got that hose and all that stuff that I hooked up now, though I can check so I can show you the exhaust. Now let me show you this. What you're supposed to see when we get into our exhaust gas analysis, we're supposed to see CO2 is supposed to be high, and HC and CO are supposed to be low. You've also got oxygen. If you got a heck of a lot of oxygen in the exhaust, something's going wrong there too. But basically, the long and the short of it is this and that's supposed to be low, CO2 is supposed to be high. My exhaust gas analyzer does not measure NOx, okay? But I do have a 4-gas. I don't have a 5-gas. I got a 4-gas. I'll have to show you that. And unless you go to work at a green state or somewhere like California or whatever, you're not going to be measuring exhaust anyway. We did it at the Volkswagen place to adjust the airflow meter. That was the only time we set the CO at 1%. Incidentally, HC is measured parts per million, CO is measured percent, CO2 is measured percent. We need to bust off that machine, fire it up, and let you see what those readings look like. It's really important that you know. So let's look at PO422. Catalytic converter efficiency failure is set. That's a code. Any or all of these could be the cause except, we got an engine mechanical fault. Could that be the cause of it?
Yes.
Okay, what about exhaust leak? Could that be the cause of it?
Yes.
Okay, what about an exhaust restriction? That's not typically going to give you a catalytic efficiency failure, typically. Fuel contamination might, though. If you got something that's causing, a lot of gummy stuff to get down there and clog up the cat, you're liable to have a fuel. But you're not going to typically, you're not going to have that as a result of the exhaust restriction. So 19, whenever you look at 19, that'll be a C. How is the oxygen storage ability of the catalytic converter tested? I just talked about that a few minutes ago, y'all. What is it? Remember the picture of it?
O2 sensor in the downstream.
Bingo. See, you just learned something before. 20. That's number 20, a C. The catalytic converter in the exhaust system is used for what? A. Reducing emissions created by the engine. They don't use it to take up space in the exhaust system. They don't use it to warm the underneath of the vehicle. And they don't use it to give the vehicle a proper weight.
Why would you want to take up space?
You wouldn't. That's why A is the right answer and the rest of them are stupid. Now, we had seen these years ago at the filling station over there that I worked at in the 70s. There was a Chevelle or some kind of Chevrolet car that was in there. No catalytic converters on that car. The muffler would get red hot. It would go so hot that it would make the carpet smoke on the inside of the car.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And there was a guy named Cliff Acreage that used to work at the machine shop up there, and he had, worked at the Cadillac dealership and stuff for a long time. And this guy right here had got to where he understood those older cars so well that if you called and told him one of the symptoms, he would give you the other symptom and then tell you what was wrong with it without even seeing the car. You could just talk to him on the phone.
I know a guy like that.
And he was just sharp as a tack. Now, nobody can do that nowadays on just any and every car because there's too many different platforms. But anyway, whenever Obi, at the, in 1975, I could pull steel and rebuild an engine, but a lot of times I didn't have, I had trouble finding out what was wrong with one because I was young like you guys, didn't have any, troubleshoot experience. But he says you either got a vacuum leak or the ignition timing is late.
On that car with the red hot exhaust?
Mm-hmm. And so Obi opened the hood and he looked around, look at there, look, I fixed a vacuum leak and it cooled right down.
Because it was running lean, right?
Yeah, it actually had gasoline that was making it all the way down into the muffler before it lit off. Yeah, that was an interesting thing. And you guys have heard your backfiring cars, right?
Yeah.
Backfire that blow the muffler up. Driving a grain truck one time, going over bumps and all that, and the coil wire jumped off. And the engine goes boo, and it fills the exhaust all up with gasoline. And they hit another bump, and the coil wire jumped back over there, and it blew the muffler up like a tin can. And it's scary too. It makes you feel like it raises the truck up about 2 feet in the air when it did. Okay, let me go down here. Let's see. What's the purpose of the post or downstream oxygen sensor? Excuse me, B, is that what you said? 22, that's good. Ben?
Go Ben.
Outstanding performance. Since the early 1990s, many converters also contain blank, an element that can store oxygen. Cerium. Technician A says a catalytic converter is an after-treatment device that reduces exhaust emissions outside of the engine. Technician B says the honeycomb shape of the catalytic converter is constructed out of aluminum, about 0.006 of an inch thick with small square openings.
It's not aluminum.
It's not aluminum. What is it?
It's platinum.
It's like, no, platinum?
It says it right here.
It's a ceramic substrate, isn't it?
It says the converter contains small amounts of rhodium, palladium, and platinum. And you're right.
Is that the honeycomb?
Yeah.
Of course, it's not really a honeycomb. It's actually got a little square
If
thing.
you hit it, it'll crack and bust. So.
Exactly, it will. And or if sometimes it'll break loose in there and start rattling around. 24. All right, that's A. Technician A. Catalytic converter can be harmed by all of these except.
It says lean air fuel ratio.
Lean air fuel ratio. If it's running a little too hot, it's not that big of a deal. Now, it can overheat it if it's rich and burn it up, but the lean air fuel ratio is not going to be a problem there.
And I'll tell you about it.
Question number 18 has got to be edited. It is ridiculous. Beats all I've ever seen.
Can you do me a favor, though?
Yeah.
You just call the store account stuff for me.
Sir, what?
Don't you get a discount on it?
The school does.